I still remember the night I first stumbled onto that forgotten farm road. The air felt heavy, as though the fog itself was pressing against my chest. Every step I took crunched against brittle leaves, the sound echoing far too loud in the silence. The old windmill stood like a crooked spine in the distance, its blades groaning whenever the breeze pushed through. I thought I was alone, just a traveler passing through, but the stillness carried something else. Lights shimmered in the fog, faint, flickering, as though a lantern was being carried across the fields. But there were no houses left standing here, no people who could have been out this late. My breath misted in front of me, and I noticed the ground beneath me wasn't dirt anymore, but wet, as if something had seeped through from beneath. A low hum began to roll through the trees, mechanical, steady, too precise to be the wind. I felt it in my ribs before I heard it in my ears. My instincts told me to turn back, but my eyes kept searching the horizon, and that's when I saw it. The cornfield stretched farther than I thought it could. Mist curled low to the ground, damp against my skin. The night was quiet, too quiet, except for the rustle of dry stalks brushing together. I first saw it as a faint glow, pale, almost gentle, like someone holding a lantern. The air smelled of wet earth and decay. Each step I took sank slightly into soft mud. The light drifted, swaying between the rows, just out of reach. I thought maybe it was a farmer, maybe someone lost. But the fields had been abandoned for years. A hum rose beneath it, subtle at first. A vibration I felt more in my chest than in my ears. It made the hairs along my arms stand straight. The closer I got, the more the fog seemed to thicken. It swallowed the path behind me, erased the edges of the corn. Shadows stretched unnaturally, bending like they had weight I could not see. My breath came out in small puffs, mist mixing with mist. The hum grew louder, not mechanical, not wind, not anything I could name. I stopped. The glow pulsed, soft at first, then stronger, a heartbeat under the soil. I knelt to touch it. The earth was warm, almost alive beneath my fingers. I felt a vibration travel up my arms, slow, deliberate, like something waking. I took another step. A shadow moved just below the surface, rippling through the dirt. The light wasn't carried. It emerged from beneath, slow, rhythmic, almost breathing. I wanted to turn back, but my legs refused. Curiosity and fear held me rooted in place. The corn whispered with movement, soft footfalls, or the wind pretending. I couldn't tell the difference. The glow pulsed again, brighter now. It revealed shapes in the soil, soft mounds, shifting just enough to make me question my eyes. I crouched lower. The hum filled the silence around me. I could feel it vibrating in my teeth, in my rib cage. Every instinct screamed to run. I reached toward it, fingers brushing the earth. The vibration sank deeper into my bones, and a faint static filled the air. It wasn't dangerous. Exactly. But it wasn't safe either. The mist closed in from every side. The world shrank to the glow, the hum, the touch of damp earth on my skin. I felt alone in a way that made the night heavy. I blinked. The glow dipped just beneath the surface. The hum softened, almost disappointed, as if it had noticed me. I stepped back. My boots sank into the mud. I shivered, not from cold, but from the awareness of what I couldn't name. I didn't look away, but I didn't move closer either. The light pulsed one last time, slow and deliberate, and then it disappeared. The fog stayed. The corn stayed. The hum faded into silence. I walked home. Every step echoed. The mist clung to my hair, my clothes, my thoughts. And I knew, even when I closed my eyes at night, it was still there, beneath the soil, waiting. The barn sat at the edge of the field, gray with rot, windows clouded with dust. The air smelled of straw, mold, and the chill of approaching night. I noticed at first as a faint buzz, static, a low hum that didn't belong to anything living. It drifted over grass, soft and uneven. The door creaked under my hand. I hesitated. Inside, the smell was sharper. Dust mixed with something metallic, like iron. The static grew louder, filling the space between the beams. I stepped further. Footsteps soft against old wooden boards. Every shadow stretched toward me, leaning, almost waiting. Radios sat on shelves. Old televisions, stacked and forgotten, flickering. And then they turned on. Screens glowed dimly. Faces distorted, fleeting. They twisted and bent, vanishing when I looked directly at them. Eyes that weren't eyes. Mouths that whispered nothing. I wanted to step back. But the hum pressed closer, around my ears, under my skin. I felt it vibrating in my chest. A rhythm that made me shiver, slow and deliberate. The barn smelled heavier now. A mix of dust, decay, and electricity. The static rose again. It filled every corner, crawling along the rafters. I reached for the nearest radio, cold under my fingers. The dial spun by itself. The buzz became words, fractured, incomprehensible. Then silence, as if it had noticed me noticing. I moved toward the window. The fog outside pressed against the glass. Soft footsteps in the straw behind me. Or maybe just the echo of my own movement. The televisions flickered faster. Light strobed across the walls. A face lingered longer than the others, blurred, half smiling. It vanished when my eyes tried to hold it. I could feel it staring, though. I stepped outside. The static followed. It hovered in the cold air, brushing against my hair, my clothes. Even the grass seemed to hum beneath my feet. I tried to leave, but the night was still, heavy with anticipation. The buzz ebbed and pulsed, like something breathing just behind me. I glanced back at the barn. Windows dark again. Shadows swallowed the interior, yet the hum lingered. A reminder, soft and insistent, that it was not gone. I walked home slowly. Every step measured, careful. The wind whispered through the trees. The static whispered too, faint, following, impossible to shake. I reached the edge of the field. The last flicker of light from the barn disappeared, and still in the quiet, I could feel it pulsing in the night. Alone, breath catching the chill, I understood. It waits. Everywhere. The windmill stood at the edge of the field. Its blades were still, yet it creaked. A slow, deliberate groan that carried across the fog. The grass was damp under my feet. A chill ran along my arms. The night smelled of wet earth and cold iron. I stopped. The fog thickened around the base of the windmill. Shapes moved inside it. Or maybe outside. I couldn't tell. My shadow stretched across the field. But then another shadow appeared. It didn't match my shape. Longer, wider, waiting behind me. I felt it in the back of my neck before I saw it. A presence. Still, silent, patient. The wind whispered through the blades. Or maybe it was whispering through the fog itself. I stepped closer. The air vibrated with cold. My breath came out in soft puffs. Each exhale disappeared almost immediately. The shadows shifted again. They didn't belong to me. They moved with a will of their own, stretching across the damp grass, dissolving into the mist. I blinked. The windmill groaned louder. Those blades didn't move. A hollow rhythm, like a heart in the dark. The fog clung to my clothes, my hair, my skin. I smelled something faint. Smoke? Or iron? I couldn't be sure. I dared to look behind me. Nothing. The fields were empty, yet the shadow lingered. Close, just out of reach. Soft rustling followed my steps. Or maybe it came from the shadows themselves. The creak of the windmill synchronized with my heartbeat. Slow, heavy, deliberate. I raised a hand. The shadow mimicked nothing. It stayed apart, watching, waiting. I felt the fog press against my face. The windmill's groan softened, but the sense of being observed didn't fade. I could almost feel the shape behind me. I backed away. Every step careful, measured. The shadow stayed. The fog wrapped tighter around my legs. I reached the edge of the field. The windmill loomed above me, silent now. The shadow melted into the fog. Yet something remained. A presence, cold and patient. It did not leave. I walked home slowly, breath catching in the night air. The memory of the shadow lingered. Long after the windmill faded behind the mist. Alone, I understood. Some things wait. Even when the fields are empty. The house sat low in the earth. No windows. A single narrow door, gray and weathered. The grass around it bent under a cold wind. I approached slowly. The air smelled of damp soil and rust. Each step sank into the soft ground. Mist clung to my ankles, cold and heavy. The door groaned when I pushed it open. Inside, the smell deepened. Rust, dust, something faintly metallic that made the back of my throat tighten. The walls, they hummed, softly at first, a vibration under my skin. I felt it in my chest, in my teeth. The floorboards creaked. Beneath them, voices, low, muffled, almost whispering. Not outside, not distant. Beneath me, I crouched, hand on the boards. The hum pulsed with each heartbeat. Words formed fragmented, but vanished when I tried to listen. Something alive beneath the floor, moving with intent. The air was still, yet full. Dust stirred in the corners, catching pale light from the doorway. Shadows leaned against walls, long and thin. I thought I saw shapes shift, or imagined them. I stepped further inside. The hum became rhythmical. A pulse I could follow, slow and steady like breathing. Every step I took made the voices tremble, as if aware of me. The floor felt hollow, cold, uneven, almost liquid under my fingers. I pressed my ear close. The voices whispered again. Fragments of sentences, names, questions, laughs that weren't joyful. I shivered. The rust smelled stronger now. The walls seemed to lean closer, listening, waiting. Soft footsteps, my own or theirs. Impossible to tell. I moved toward the center. The humming filled the space, wrapping around me. The voices grew clearer, almost coherent, yet still just beneath reach. I could feel them vibrating under boards. I paused, breathed. The silence pressed into my lungs. Then the whispering returned, gentle and insistent. I wanted to leave, but something kept me there. Curiosity and fear braided together. The hum pulled me toward the narrow doorway again. Reluctantly, I stepped outside. The night air hit my skin. Cool, damp, scented with earth. The voices stopped, but the hum lingered faintly, fading slowly. I looked back. The windowless house hunched in the darkness. Silent, waiting, alone. I felt it even as I walked away. The memory of its breath beneath the floorboards, the soft vibration under my skin. And I knew, somehow, it would be there when I returned. The cornfields stretched endlessly. Overgrown stalks bent under a damp breeze. Night pressed close, heavy with fog and the scent of wet earth. I stepped carefully. The stalks whispered as I moved, rustling patterns, like soft fingers brushing against each other. A rhythm that was entirely random. The air smelled sweet and decayed, mingled. Each footstep sank slightly into the soft ground. My breath caught in the cold. Heavy air. Something moved ahead. A parting of stalks, subtle, circling. Closer than I had expected. Slow, deliberate. I paused. The corn swayed, bending toward me, not with wind but with intent. Shadows leaned, stretching along the fog. I could feel them pressing at my skin, brushing against my arms. At the far end of the field, shapes stood, human-like, still, but stiff, rehearsed, too precise to be random. I squinted. The fog made their edges soft, but the posture was rigid. A tilt of a head here, a step there, but unnaturally perfect. They had not been planted yesterday. That certainty sank into my chest like cold water. The air thickened. Static hummed faintly through the stalks, vibrating the ground beneath my feet. Soft footsteps followed me, or maybe the echo of my own movements. The corn whispered closer, with each heartbeat. I tried to step forward. A stalk brushed my shoulder. Cool, wet, as if alive. The shapes remained, unblinking, silent. I circled, trying to find a path between them. They mirrored my movement just slightly, subtle, almost imperceptible. It was not reflection. It was awareness. The fog pressing, thick, moist. I smelled the musk of the earth and the stalks in bloom. A low hum thrummed in my chest. Each breath drawn seemed to carry it deeper inside me. I stopped again. The figures hadn't moved, yet they felt closer. The rustling stalks formed patterns around me, circling, enclosing, patient. I wanted to call out. The sound died in my throat. Even the fog seemed to swallow noise. Only soft footsteps and rustling remained. I backed away. Slowly, the figures stayed still, watching, unyielding. The chill of their presence brushed against me. I reached the edge of the cornfield. The night air hit my skin like cold silk. The stalks whispered behind me, retreating slightly but never entirely. I glanced back. The figures lingered in the fog, motionless, yet alive in some impossible way. Alone, breath caught in my chest, I realized what haunted me. They had always been here, waiting. The attic door creaked. Slowly, on its own, a soft groan that pulled the dust into tiny spirals in the pale light. The house smelled of old wood and cold air. The floorboards below hummed faintly, like they remembered footsteps from long ago. I hesitated, hand hovering above the door. I pushed it open. Inside, rows of children's shoes. Neat, precise, each pair smaller than the next, and each sole burned with strange symbols. The air felt heavier, warm, almost metallic. A faint rustle, like fabric brushing against wood, tickled my ears. I knelt to touch one. The leather was dry, the burn marks rough against my fingers. A faint vibration pulsed beneath the boards. Small, deliberate. Then I heard it. Soft footsteps above. A patter. Quick. Too light for the roof. The attic was too thin to hold a weight like that. I froze. The shoes seemed to lean. Shadows twisting along the walls. Each step echoed inside me. Not outside. Not below. Directly above. The air smelled faintly of ash. The hum from floorboards pulsed with the rhythm of tiny feet running. I could feel it in my ribs. In my teeth, I stepped closer to the rows. The symbols burned deeper in appearance than the leather could allow. Strange, curling shapes. Lines that bent unnaturally, impossible to trace fully. The patter continued, stopping suddenly, then moving again, as if something unseen was rehearsing. Over and over, above me, I reached for the nearest shoe. Cold leather under my fingertips. The burn mark felt warm, though it had long been set. A heartbeat in the wood beneath, faint yet insistent. The attic felt smaller. The walls leaned inward. Shadows pressed along corners. I smelled faint powder, like old chalk or dried paint. The light bent oddly, as if avoiding the far side of the room. The soft footsteps moved again, circling, stopping, circling. The boards under my knees trembled. The air quivered around me. I backed toward the door slowly. Rows of shoes glimmered faintly in the dim light. Each burned soul seemed to watch. Waiting, I stepped outside. The footsteps ceased immediately. Silence pressed into the attic, thick and absolute, yet the memory of motion lingered in the air. The house smelled of wood, ash, and something expectant. I felt the weight of the attic above me, and I knew, even empty, it was alive in some impossible way. Alone, breath catching in the chill, I understood. The shoes had never been left to rest. They waited, and the little footsteps would return. The field stretched under a pale autumn sky. Corn stood tall, rustling softly in a breeze that smelled of damp earth and decaying leaves. The fog lay low, brushing against my ankles, cold and wet. I noticed it first in the husks. They looked wrong, cracked, splitting along seams that shouldn't exist. A pale glow emanated from within. I stepped closer. The air smelled faintly sweet, almost like honey turned sour. The glow pulsed softly, rhythmic, like a heartbeat beneath the corn. I reached out. Fingers brushed the husk. It hummed, a deep, vibrating note that echoed in my chest, like a tuning fork struck in silence. The stalks shivered around me. Shadows bent along the rows, stretching long in the fog. The glow pulsed again, a slow, deliberate rhythm that seemed to wear my touch. I knelt to touch another, cool skin beneath my fingertips. A warmth radiated from the glowing core. The hum grew louder, filling the mist. It pressed against my bones, soft but insistent. I stepped back. The field stretched farther than I thought possible. Rows upon rows of glowing husks. Waiting, patient, a breeze carried the smell of rusted metal and wet soil. I heard soft rustling footsteps. Or Maybe the echo of my own movements. The fog clung closer, pressing against my chest. The glow expanded slowly as night fell. The field became a sea of pale light, soft and strange, almost liquid. It looked like it was waiting to be collected. For some harvest I did not understand. I traced my hand along a stalk. The hum vibrated through my fingers, through my wrist, through the soles of my boots, sinking into the damp soil. I backed away, every step careful, deliberate. The glow stayed. The husks trembled, as if alive, as if aware of my presence. The air smelled thicker now, sweet, metallic, alive. The fog carried whispers I could not name. The hum became a low resonance in the night. I paused at the edge of the field. The glowing corn stretched before me. A quiet expectation lingered, alone, breath-catching. I felt it waiting. The pale harvest, patient and inevitable. Even as I walked away, the light seemed to follow, a soft, distant pulse beneath the fog. And I knew somehow it would never truly leave. The field was quiet under the gray night sky. Mist rolled across the ground, heavy and damp. The air smelled of wet soil and rust. The tractor sat abandoned, old, rusted, its tires sunk slightly into the earth. I noticed at first as a dark shape, still and waiting. Then movement. Headlights flickered on, a pale light cutting through the fog. Slow, hesitant. The engine hummed low, vibrating through the soles of my boots. Cold air pressed against my skin, carrying the scent of oil and metal. I stayed still, heart tightening with each passing second. The tractor inched forward, soft, deliberate, like it remembered the field better than I did. The fog swallowed its edges, made the lights look almost alive. I stepped closer. The ground smelled richer, dampened by night. I could hear the rustle of distant leaves, the faint hum of the engine. The tractor moved like it was aware I was watching. Shadows twisted across the corn at the field's edge. The fog blurred the shapes of the trees. I felt alone, but not lonely. Something was here with me, patient, deliberate. It passed silently. Soft tires on wet earth. The headlights flickered once, twice, and then the machine vanished into fog. I blinked. The field was empty. Mist drifted between the stalks. No sign of movement. No glow. Only silence and the scent of rust. I stayed through the night. Cold seeped into my clothes, into my bones. Every rustle, every whisper wind made me glance toward the fog. Morning came slowly. The sun filtered weakly through clouds. The tractor sat exactly where it had been the night before. Still, rusted, silent. No tracks led away. No evidence of movement. The fog had receded. Yet I could still feel the hum in my chest, soft and insistent. I stepped closer, cold metal under my fingers. The tires sank slightly into the damp earth. Everything appeared normal. Yet I knew it had been here. It had moved. And it would again. I walked away, breath visible in the chill morning air. The field stretched empty. Yet the memory lingered. The hum, the pale lights flickering through the fog. The quiet awareness of the tractor. Alone I understood. Some things move when we are not watching, and some things wait. The woods behind the farmhouse lay still. Fog curled around the trees, heavy and damp. The air smelled of wet earth, pine, and something faintly sweet. I heard it first. Voices, soft, harmonized, wordless, floating through the mist like wind through the branches. I stepped forward. Footsteps muffled by moss and fallen leaves. The fog pressed against my face, wet and cool. The hum of the voices vibrated faintly in my chest. Shapes appeared between the trees, figures swaying slowly in a circle. I blinked. Their mouths moved, but no sound came out. The singing continued. Inside my own head now, a low hum that pressed against my thoughts. Soft, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. I moved closer. The fog clung to my clothes. Branches brushed my arms, cold and damp. The figures did not notice, or they chose not to. The air smelled sharper here. A hint of rust, of iron, of something ancient. The silence around the figures was absolute, yet the hum in my head grew stronger. I crouched, trying to see their faces clearly. Pale shapes, almost featureless. Eyes closed, heads tilted slightly. Their sway was deliberate, synchronized, too perfect to be natural. I stepped back. The ground beneath my feet was soft and wet. Mist rose from it in thin tendrils. The hum carried with me, inside, unrelenting. The circle remained. Figures moving together, silent, impossible. I felt exposed and small. The forest had closed around me without moving. I turned to leave. The voices faded slowly, but the hum stayed, vibrating inside my chest, inside my skull. The fog thinned as I walked back toward the farmhouse. The forest quieted. Shadows retreated into the trees. The humming lingered, soft, insistent, like a memory I could not shake. I reached the porch, cold boards under my hands. The night air lighter, yet the voices remained inside me. Alone, breath catching, I understood. Some sounds do not come from outside. Some choirs never truly end. The silo loomed at the edge of the field. Tall, cylindrical, gray metal streaked with rust. Fog curled around its base, damp and heavy. The air smelled of grain, metal, and cold earth. I noticed faint flashes from inside. Soft, pale light pulsing upward, like a signal. Silent, deliberate, almost breathing. I touched the ladder. Cold metal under my fingers. Rough, worn by years of wind and rain. Each rung hummed faintly beneath my grip. I climbed slowly, breath visible in the chill night air. The fog pressed against my face, damp and heavy. The hum from the silo pulsed under my fingertips, soft but insistent. Higher. The light grew brighter, flashing against the interior metal walls. I saw strange symbols burned into the steel. Curled lines, impossible shapes. Faintly glowing, almost alive. I paused. The air smelled sharper now. Ozone rust, heat. The pulsing light reflected in the fog outside. And I felt it, something watching. I climbed carefully, each rung cold beneath my palms. The hum grew louder, vibrating my chest. Shadows stretched along the interior. I could hear the faint rustling of the field below, though nothing moved. The symbols glowed brighter with each flash. I traced one with my finger. Heat beneath my skin, though the metal was cold. A pulse of energy hummed in rhythm with the flashes. I looked down. The field lay empty, but a presence lingered, watching. Shadows twisted between the stalks. The fog moved, curling around shapes that might not exist. The ladder felt impossibly high. Each step measured, slow, deliberate. The hum intertwined with the pulsing light. Inside my own head now, vibrating in rhythm with the symbols. I reached the top. The silo narrowed, pale light spilling through cracks. The symbols glowed faintly beneath my eyes. Soft, intricate, curling shapes. Waiting, patient, aware. I leaned against the metal. The night smelled of earth and distant rain. The hum continued, insistent. Inside me, the field remained empty, but I knew it was not alone. I climbed down slowly, each rung cold, vibrating faintly. The flashes continued above, pulsing through the fog, and the symbols burned in memory, etched into my vision. Outside, the field was still. The fog pressed against my clothes. I could feel eyes on me, though nothing moved. Soft rustling followed me. Or perhaps it was a wind. I stepped away. The silo loomed behind me, silent and patient. The symbols glimmered faintly, even from below. The hum lingered inside me. Alone, breath catching in the chill, I understood. Some signals wait to be seen. Some presences wait to be noticed. And some lights, no matter how far, never truly vanish. The barn rose at the edge of the field. Massive, gray, silent. No doors. No windows. Just walls that pressed upward against the night sky. I walked around it. The grass damp beneath my boots, smelling of earth and rusted metal. Fog curled low, brushing against my legs, thick and cold. At first, it looked solid, but as I circled, the walls shifted. Corners stretched, panels bent, lines that didn't match my memory. Every pass, the barn was subtly different. The air was still, heavy, yet carried a faint metallic tang, like old iron, like blood in the wind. A low hum vibrated under the soles of my boots. I crouched to touch the wall. Cold, slick, impossibly smooth. It pulsed faintly beneath my fingers. Alive. Night deepened. The fog thickened, curling into shapes along the ground. I felt eyes watching, though nothing moved. Soft rustling pressed against the edges of my hearing. Then scratching, slow at first. Scrapes across metal, like hooves dragging against steel. Inside the barn. Impossible, yet undeniable. I stepped back. The wall I had touched shifted slightly. The barn seemed to breathe. Corners stretching, surfaces bending toward me. The scratching continued. Measured, patient. The fog carried it into my chest. I could feel vibrations through my bones. A rhythm I could not escape. I circled once more. The barn looked familiar and wrong at the same time. Panels shimmered in pale light. Shadows bent along its edges. It seemed aware of my presence. The air smelled sharper now. Ozone, wet wood, iron. I held my breath. Every exhale seemed amplified in the silence. I crouched again near a corner. The scratching stopped. A soft thrum remained, pulsing in the walls. Then, far away, a distant scrape began again. I walked to the edge of the field. Fog clung to my clothes, heavy and damp. The barn loomed behind me, silent, yet breathing in some impossible way. Alone, breath-catching, I understood. It had no doors, yet it could enter and leave me at will. And it waited, patient, for the next night, the next circle, the next moment I returned. The gate creaked under the wind. Fog pressed low, curling around the fence posts. The air smelled of wet grass and iron. She was there, a child, small, pale, standing perfectly still. Eyes too dark to catch any light. Her voice came flat, rehearsed. I need to find my mother. The words held no warmth, no inflection, no breath. I stepped closer. The grass bent beneath my boots, damp and heavy. Fog clung to my clothes, cold and thick. She didn't move. The wind shifted around her, a low hum, vibrating softly through fence. The silence pressed into my ears. I reached out, fingers trembling slightly. Her hand was cold. Then nothing. She vanished. No trace. No echo. Only the faint smell of wet earth, and iron remained. I stumbled back. The fog thickened, curling between the fence posts. Shadows shifted. Rustling whispered in the stillness. Her voice lingered, soft inside my head. I need to find my mother. Endless, insistent, hollow. I looked around. The gate swung slightly. Alone now, breath catching in my chest. The night smelled of damp grass and something sweeter, faintly wrong. I could still feel her presence, hovering at the edge of the fog, eyes that swallowed the light. Watching, waiting. I moved away, every step careful, deliberate. The hum in the air seemed to follow, soft, insistent, like a memory pressed against my bones. Alone, breath catching, I understood. Some children do not wait to be found. Some vanish before they are ever held. The fog thickened further, and somewhere, just beyond the gate, the black eyes lingered. The field was quiet under the gray dawn. Mud clung to my boots, cold and heavy. The fog lay thick, curling along the furrows, smelling of wet earth and moss. I noticed them first. Footprints, fresh, deep impressions in the soft soil, leading into the fog. I stepped closer. The air smelled sharper now, metal, damp grass, something faintly sweet. The ground squelched beneath each careful step. The prints, they were too regular, deliberate. I followed. Fog pressed against my face, damp and persistent. The footprints wound slowly, deliberately, twisting like a question I could not answer. I felt the hum of the earth under my boots. The field stretched endlessly. Shadows bent along the furrows. Rustling whispered to the fog, soft and fleeting. The prints led onward. I paused, breathed the damp air. The footprints looped. They had doubled back. Or perhaps they had never left. I stepped carefully again. The mud held my weight, clinging to my soles. The footprints repeated, spiraling, endless. I followed, drawn by a rhythm I could not name. The fog thickened, shapes twisted in its veil. Nothing moved, yet I felt eyes pressing from the gray, soft, insistent. The footprints continued ahead, always ahead. I crouched, tracing one with my finger. Cold, wet impression deeply into the earth. The hum of the soil thrummed in my chest. Every step forward, the prints stretched away. I walked for hours or minutes. I could not tell. The fog and the footprints looped endlessly. Every turn, every step led me back into the mist, chasing something that did not want to be found. The air smelled heavier now, iron and wet clay. Soft footsteps echoed in my own mind. The footprints never ended. They wound through shadows, through fog, through silence. I stopped, breath catching, damp mist clinging to my clothes. Alone, the footprints stretched before me, endless and patient. I could feel them moving even when I did not. The field lay still around me. The fog curled and shifted, hiding shapes, hiding truths. And still the footprints continued, chasing, winding, waiting. I turned back. The prints followed. Inside my mind, inside the soil, inside the fog. I could not escape them. Alone, breath shallow, I understood. Some paths never end. Some footsteps do not belong to the earth. And some pursuits will never allow rest. The well sat behind the farmhouse. Stone, old and blackened with moss. The air smelled of damp earth, mildew, and something faintly metallic. Fog curled low, brushing against my boots. I dropped the stone inside. Nothing. No splash. No echo. Just a dark waiting. I tried again. Same result. The stone vanished into silence. The hum of the night pressed into my ears, soft and insistent. I leaned closer, cold stone under my palms. The fog pressed against my face. I could feel the weight of the darkness inside. Then I saw it, a pale hand emerging from the depths, thin, wet, impossibly still. It didn't grasp the edge. It didn't climb. It only beckoned downward. I stepped back, heart tightening, breath visible in the chill night air. The hand waited, patient, deliberate. The earth smelled heavier now, damp, iron, old wood. The fog twisted around me, carrying whispers I could not place. Soft rustling pressed to the edges of my hearing. I reached out, almost against my own will. The hand remained, pale against the black. No nails, no markings, just the shape of something human and wrong. It pulsed faintly with the darkness. I drew my hand back. The fog seemed to thicken, curling closer to the well. Shadows twisted along the edges. The silence was heavier than the night. I watched. The hand continued to beckon. Inside my head, a low hum rose, echoing, insistent, impossible to ignore. I stepped away. The earth was soft beneath my boots, cold and wet. The well remained still, black, and patient. The hand disappeared slowly, as if pulled back into the dark. Alone, breath catching, I understood. It did not want to leave. It did not want to climb. It only wanted someone to follow. I turned back toward the farmhouse. The fog curled around my legs. The night smelled of earth, stone, and waiting. And somewhere behind me, the darkness waited still, patient, for the next drop, the next glance, the next unwary hand. The barn rose at the edge of the field, wood darkened by rain and age. Fog curled low, brushing against the wet grass. The air smelled of earth and cold wood. Above, an owl perched, still, rigid, eyes bright in the pale light. Fixed on me, I stepped closer. The grass whispered under my boots. The fog pressed damp against my face. The owl's body remained unmoving. Closer still, I felt the roughness of the barn siding under my palms. The cold seeped into my fingers, into my bones. The owl did not shift, only its eyes. They followed, unblinking, alive. I froze, breath catching in the chill air. A soft hum, almost imperceptible, pressed through the fog. The world seemed to hold its breath. I reached the base of the barn. The owl's head tilted fractionally, eyes following every movement. Rigid, carved, yet aware. The air smelled sharper now, metal and damp leaves. The wind rustled through the field, brushing my clothes. The owl remained, I backed away. Soft footsteps pressed into the mud behind me. The fog curled tighter around the barn. The owl's gaze never left me. I turned, stepping into the field. Cold air against my face, earth against my boots. The owl's body stayed still. Its eyes followed, luminous in the gray. Alone, breath-catching, I understood. It did not need to move. Its presence was enough. Watching, waiting, patient. The fog thickened. The barn stood dark and silent, and the owl remained above, rigid, yet alive in the unblinking light. The fields lay still under the night. Fog curled low, thick and damp. The air smelled of earth, hay, and cold dew. I saw them first. Figures in straw hats, moving slowly, deliberately, hands pulling at nothing, bending over invisible crops. I stepped closer. The soft crunch of mud beneath my boots. Fog pressed against my face. Their movements remained silent, mechanical, rehearsed. I could see the moonlight catching the edges of their hats. Shadows stretching long across the furrows. The air hummed faintly, like the ground itself was breathing. I watched. They never looked up, never spoke, just worked, pulling at air and earth. The smell of damp hay grew stronger, mingling with the fog. I moved along the edge of the field. Every step cautious, deliberate. The figures followed their endless task, hands tugging at crops that weren't there, feet pressing into wet soil, leaving no mark. The night deepened. The fog thickened. Breath caught in my chest. The hum rose, soft and insistent, vibrating through the ground. I leaned closer to the nearest figure. Its movements remained stiff, unmoving except for the hands. I could see fibers of straw shifting under the hat's rim. The air smelled faintly sweet, decayed, impossible to place. Time seemed to stretch. The figures continued, silent, methodical, pulling, bending, collecting nothing, yet everything. The field shimmered faintly under the moon, fog curling between the stalks. Then the first light of dawn broke. Soft, pale, washing over the fog. The figures collapsed, not stepping away, not walking off, just falling into themselves. Bodies folding into piles of hay, stillness replacing motion. The air smelled of straw and damp earth. The field was empty, except for the piles of hay, silent, patient, and the lingering hum beneath the soil, fading slowly with the rising sun. I walked away, breath shallow, footsteps soft on the wet grass. Alone, the fog began to lift. The earth beneath my boots still seemed to vibrate faintly. The memory of hands pulling at nothing stayed with me. The sun rose higher. Birds called faintly from the edges of the field. But the silence remained. And somewhere beneath the soil, the hum waited. The farmhouse was quiet. Fog pressed against the windows. The air smelled of cold wood and damp earth. I heard it first. A faint crackle, almost beneath the hum of the night. The old radio on the shelf. Silent yesterday. Today it whispered. Static shifted, curling like smoke. Then words, coordinates, strange phrases. And my skin prickled. Each one matched my exact location. I moved closer. The wood beneath my feet groaned. The fog pressed through cracks in the walls. The radio hummed faintly, whispering again. I could feel the vibration in my chest. The air tasted metallic, damp. Every phrase, every coordinate, I recognized. Somehow impossibly it knew. I reached out. The radio was cold, almost alive beneath my fingers. Static rippled like water. The coordinates repeated, clearer this time. A pattern drawn just for me. I stepped back. Soft footsteps against the floorboards. The fog pressed closer to glass. Whispers wrapped around my ears. Almost my own voice. The words became sharper, deliberate. Names, numbers, directions. All pointing here. To me. To the spot. I turned in a slow circle. The farmhouse smelled of dust and old wire. Shadows stretched long in the corners. The radio's hum pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat I could not touch. I leaned close again. The coordinates repeated. A faint tremor ran through the floor. The phrases became instructions. Impossible to ignore. Impossible to forget. I stepped away once more. The fog pressed against the windows. Cold air brushed my face. The radio continued its whispering. Alone, breath shallow. I realized it was not just giving directions. It was watching, waiting, tracing me, drawing me in. I left the room. The static faded slightly behind me, but the hum lingered in my chest. The coordinates repeated in my mind. Soft, insistent. Outside, the fog wrapped the fields in pale light. The night smelled of earth, metal, and unseen things moving. I glanced back. The radio was silent again, but I could feel its gaze. Every step forward, the coordinates pulsing in my mind, the static waiting, patient. And somewhere inside the house, or inside me, the radio whispered still. The field stretched wide under a gray, low-hanging fog. Cold earth pressed against my boots. The air smelled of wet grass and faint smoke. I saw it then. A white door, standing alone. No walls. No frame. Just a door, pale against the fog. I stepped closer. Soft footsteps pressed into the damp soil. The fog swirled around me, brushing my arms. The door seemed almost a hum. Faintly, the handle was cold, smooth under my fingers. I lifted it slowly. The hinge creaked, sharp and soft at once. Beyond the door, another night sky, darker than the one above. Stars arranged in ways I had never seen, patterns that made my chest tighten. I leaned forward. The wind shifted through the field, brushing against my face. The stars seemed to pulse, gentle, rhythmic. A faint scent of ozone and something sweet, impossible to name, lingered. I stepped through. The fog outside vanished instantly. Cool air brushed my skin differently, thinner, sharper. The earth beneath me was soft, almost liquid, yet solid. I looked back. The white door shimmered faintly, no longer plain, but glowing just at its edges. The field behind it seemed distant, unreal. I breathed slowly. The silence stretched, heavy. No rustle of leaves, no distant bird, only the pulse of stars. The hum from the door lingered, soft and insistent. I reached out. Fingers brushed the surface of the door. It was cold, yet almost alive beneath my touch. A faint vibration ran along my arm. The patterns of the stars shifted slowly. Impossible constellations rearranging. I felt the pull of their order, hypnotic and calm. Time seemed to stretch and fold around me. I stepped back, then forward again. The doorway remained unchanged. Alone, breath shallow, I realized it led nowhere I could name, yet somewhere I could feel. The fog outside curled, distant and unreal. The earth smelled faintly of rain and something ancient. The stars pulsed once more, gently, as if waiting. I turned my gaze from the door. The field beyond seemed smaller, compressed. The white door stood quietly, patient, holding the unknown night sky within it. I left it there, soft footsteps fading into the wet grass. The hum lingered in my chest. In the mind's eye, the stars continued to pulse, endless, silent, and watchful. The cornfield stretched under a low, gray sky. Fog pressed against the stalks. The earth smelled damp, faintly of rotten straw. I saw it first from the edge of the field. The scarecrow, tall and rigid, its head tilted slightly to the left. I thought it was the wind. I returned the next morning. The head had shifted again, a little more deliberate. The arms, thin sticks wrapped in cloth, were no longer where I remembered. Soft footsteps carried me closer. Rustling stalks brushed against my arms. The air hummed faintly with the weight of silence. I could feel the cold edges of fog crawling over my skin. Night came. I couldn't sleep. The moon slipped behind clouds. When I returned to the field, the scarecrow had moved once more. Its head tilted further. The arms stretched outward, pointing toward the dark rows. I stepped closer, breath shallow. The cloth felt rough under my fingers. I left again. Morning came slowly. The light fell pale over the field. I froze. Its mouth, the stitches had split, torn into a wide grin. Something soft rustled behind the corn, unseen. I stepped closer, careful. The air smelled faintly of iron and dry earth. The grin seemed alive, stretching further with shadows shifting across it. I didn't move my hands. The field was silent, yet not quiet, a soft press against my chest. The scarecrow watched. I traced the rough fabric. The grin held. The tilting head, the shifting arms. All deliberate, patient. I stepped back slowly. The fog curled along the ground. My breath left thin trails in the cold air. The field seemed smaller, compressed. I left the scarecrow there. Its grin carved wide against the gray dawn. The hum lingered in my chest, faint and insistent, and I could feel, somewhere deep, that it would move again tonight. The silo rose against the fog, tall and silent. Its metal sides glistened with dew. The air smelled of damp earth and rust. I stepped closer, boots soft in the mud. The night pressed in thick. Every breath felt heavy. The wind was still, though the corn whispered faintly behind me. I knocked once. The echo stretched far, too far. It rolled and twisted, like the sound had been swallowed and tossed underground. I knocked again, longer this time. It vibrated in my chest, and the air smelled faintly of metal and old grain. I pressed my ear to the cold steel. The echo returned, different, deliberate, a soft tap answering me. I froze. The fog curled around the silo's base. A hum rose beneath my feet. The ground felt hollow, distant, alive. I stepped back slowly. The echo came again, tapping rhythmic, as though something waited far below, listening. The night pressed closer, breath fog in the cold. Every stalk in the field seemed to lean toward me. I could smell earth and the faint decay of old wood. I tapped again. The echo lingered, longer than it should. Then a pause. A soft knock answered back. I could feel it under the soles of my boots. A vibration, subtle. A warning or a curiosity. I stepped around the silo. Shadows pooled against its base. The fog shifted with every motion. The echo followed, carrying to the ground like liquid metal. I crouched, fingers on cold steel, knocked lightly. Listened. The answering tap was faint, patient, intentional. And somewhere beneath, I felt the hollow stretch endlessly. I stepped away. The night swallowed the sound. The silo remained tall, silent, waiting. The fog pressed tight, carrying a lingering hum through the soil. And somewhere far below, I knew it still listened. The pasture stretched in gray light. Fog clung to the broken fences, curling around rusted posts. The air smelled of wet earth and decayed leaves. A cry pierced the silence. Soft, high-pitched, lingering. A calf, though the farm had been empty for decades. I froze. The wind shifted through the tall grass. Every stalk bent and rustled. The cry repeated, closer, mournful. I followed. Soft footsteps in mud and frost. Breath clouded in front of me. Each step echoed, swallowed quickly by the fog. Bones lay half buried in the soil. White and gnawed, brittle. The smell of dry rot mixed with damp earth. I crouched, touching the nearest fragment. Cold, fragile. The cries did not stop. They came from all around, rising from the soil itself. Each step through the field made the ground feel hollow beneath me. A subtle vibration thrummed through my boots. I moved closer to the sound. Shadows pooled in the gaps between fence posts. The fog pressed heavy. The air tasted of iron and old rain. I called softly, almost a whisper. The cry answered, closer, layered, as if more than one voice had grown from the same bone-deep grief. The soil shifted under the mist. I caught glimpses of shapes among the tall grass, not quite solid, flickering, ephemeral. The cries pulled me toward the center of the pasture. I knelt again. Bones glinted faintly beneath the soil. I traced the outline of a skull, cold, porous. Yet the cries grew, now from behind, above, within the fog. A breeze carried the scent of milk, sweet and sour. It mixed with decay, thick and choking. I wanted to turn away, but the sound anchored me, whispered in my bones. I listened. Every step through the field brought soft rustling, like the earth exhaling. The cries rose, echoing and fading. No living creature was there, yet the presence lingered, patient, calling. The fog thickened around my shoulders. Shadows stretched long and thin. The cries wove into the hum of the night, into my own heartbeat. I stood finally, bones scattered beneath the frost, silent again. But the echoes of those cries followed me, lingering in the cold air, soft, insistent, as if the pasture itself had not forgotten the calf it had lost. The morning air was damp. Mist clung to the fences, the barn, the cracked windows. Each breath tasted faintly of soil and rust. The fog thickened as I stepped into the field. It rolled over the grass in slow, heavy waves. Every sound was softened, distant, as if swallowed before it reached me. Figures moved within it, just shapes pale and shifting, close enough to reach, but when I stepped forward, they vanished. A soft rustling followed me. I paused. The fog pressed against my skin, damp and cold. It smelled of wet leaves, of decay hidden beneath the earth. Another shape hovered near the fence. I blinked. It was there, then gone. I walked slowly, careful not to disturb the silence. Every step was muted by the thickening mist. The ground felt spongy beneath my boots. A hum, faint, almost imperceptible, rose from the earth. I heard breathing, not my own, shallow, soft, close. I turned. Nothing, only the fog, moving in waves like water. Shapes flickered in and out. At first just shadows and more defined. Figures of people, or something like people, their edges blurred, twisting with the mist. I reached for one. My fingers brushed cold air. It recoiled, vanished. The fog grew denser. I could barely see the barn, the silo, the trees beyond. The world was only white and silence, broken by soft shifting shapes. I paused in the field. The hum rose slightly. It carried whispers, not words, only intonations. A rhythm that echoed in my skull. Figures circled me, slow, deliberate, intangible. I felt them press against my arms, my shoulders, but when I turned, only fog. A cold wind lifted the mist briefly. I glimpsed the farmhouse. Its roof sagged, windows dark. The shapes melted into its shadow. I stepped forward. Silence pressed heavier than the fog. The earth beneath seemed hollow. Every footstep echoed softly, endlessly. One figure lingered, closer than the rest. I could almost see its face. Almost. A hint of eyes, pale and unblinking. Then gone. The fog thinned slightly as I reached the edge of the field. Shapes remained just out of reach. I felt their gaze, patient and waiting. The hum, now a low vibration in my chest. I turned back toward the farmhouse. The fog still rolled in waves, swallowing everything. The shapes hovered, lingering, untouchable. I walked slowly, leaving them behind, but their presence followed, a soft pressure against my back. By the time I reached the cracked porch, the fog had lifted just enough to see the outline of the barn. Shapes no longer moved. Only the memory of them, the silence, heavy and complete, remained. I breathed, slow and shallow. The field behind me was empty, or seemed so, but the hum lingered in my ears. A quiet, insistent reminder that some things in the fog are closer than they appear. The night settled heavy over the cornfield. Mist drifted along the ground, curling between the stalks. Each breath was cold, damp, tasting faintly of earth and rust. A sound rose ahead. A whistle, high, hollow, as though the stalks themselves were flutes. It lingered, soft and plaintive, almost musical. I stepped forward. The whistle changed, notes bending, rising and falling. Each step altered the tune, as if the field noticed me. The stalks pressed close. Cold dew brushed my legs. Their rustling joined the whistling, subtle at first, then insistent. It was alive, or pretending to be. I paused. A new melody formed, twisting and sweet, then sharp, uneasy. It wound around me, circling, teasing, like someone breathing behind the fog. The wind was still, yet the whispers of corn surrounded me. Each whistle carried a weight, an intent I could not name. I moved closer to the heart of the field. The notes shifted again, darker now, deeper as if warning me. Shapes lingered between the stalks. I could feel them watching. The fog hugged the earth, soft and dense, but the air hummed with the music of hollow stalks. I reached out, Fingers brushed cold, wet leaves. The tune changed instantly. Higher, faster, looping back on itself. It followed my steps, alive and responsive, yet I could not find its source. A shadow passed just beyond my vision, slender, moving with the sway of the corn. I held my breath. The whistle dipped and faltered, then continued, mocking, patient. I stopped entirely. The fog pressed in. The stalks trembled slightly, as if breathing. I listened, the melody now inside my head, humming beneath my skull, turning over again. A soft wind shifted the stalks. It carried the sound to one side. I turned. Nothing. Yet the tune continued, closer now, under my feet, around my chest. I moved backward slowly. The whistles changed, almost sighing. The air smelled of wet corn and something older, decaying beneath the soil. Soft footsteps, my own, echoed oddly in the fog. The field was alive, watching, singing. I reached the edge. The notes slowed, curling upward, drifting away. Shapes retreated into the mist. The stalks quieted, but the hum lingered in my chest. I felt eyes upon me, even as the field seemed still again. I breathed, slow, shallow. The tune faded, leaving only the memory of it, a soft pressure at the back of my mind, a promise that it would return when I stepped inside again. The night was still, but not empty. The field whistled in silence. And I walked away, aware that the melody followed, just beneath the fog, bending and waiting for the next step. The sky hung low over the farmhouse. Fog rolled across the field, thick and damp. The air smelled of wet earth and decaying leaves. Every step I took pressed silently into the soft soil. Above, a shadow shifted. At first, I thought it was a wind. Then I saw them, crows. Too many, too still. They gathered in silence. No rustle of wings, no whisper of feathers. A column spiraled into the sky, twisting, tight, endless. I could feel the tension in the air, humming, static, like electricity before a storm. I stepped closer to the edge of the field. The crows watched me, or perhaps they waited. Their eyes glinted, sharp in the pale light, reflecting nothing but themselves. The column rose higher. The fog curled around it, soft and thick, smothering the world beneath. I could hear my own breath, shallow, rasping, and the soft rustle of stalks brushing against each other. Suddenly they scattered, a wave of black feathers, swirling, disappearing into the night. The soundless flight left the field empty, but the emptiness pressed down heavier than before. Something remained, tall, thin, impossible. It stood alone in the fog, as if carved from shadow itself. I couldn't tell if it moved or if the wind shifted it. The air smelled colder, sharper. The mist brushed my skin, wet and clinging. I felt a hum in my chest, low and insistent, as though the ground itself was breathing. I approached slowly. Each step felt wrong, too loud, too heavy. The figure did not sway, did not blink, but I felt eyes on me, invisible, observing. A subtle pressure in my head, matching the rhythm of my heartbeat. The fog thickened. The field disappeared around me. Only the tall, thin shape remained, anchored to the earth while the night twisted. I smelled the faint musk of crows lingering. Even though they were gone, their presence etched into the damp air. I wanted to step back. My legs refused. The silence became full, almost speaking, every breath between the fog and the figure vibrating with it. And then the figure shifted. Not a step, not a turn, just the faintest bending, like a reed brushing under a soft wind. I held my breath. The column of crows, the spiral of feathers in the sky, haunted the edges of my vision, a memory pressing against the present. The fog seemed to pulse with it, and I understood, somehow, that it had always been waiting for me, for someone, for something that I couldn't name. I turned away slowly. Every rustle of my footsteps echoed too long in the mist. The figure remained, unmoving yet alive, a sentinel in the hollowed field. The farmhouse lights flickered dimly, and I felt the faint hum follow me, through the fog, through the silence, until the field, the crows, the figure, were only shadows behind my eyes. The night pressed close against the farmhouse. Fog crept along the edges of the field, thick and soft, pulling every sound into its damp folds. From the barn, a glow rose, brighter than before, pale and trembling, like it belonged somewhere beyond this world. I froze in the soil, cold beneath my hands, the scent of wet earth and rustling hay filling my nose. The light pulsed. A hum rose from the barn, soft at first, almost welcoming, then deep, vibrating through the soil, through the wooden walls, through the hollow of my chest. I felt it in my bones, a slow, insistent resonance. I stepped forward. Each foot sank slightly into the damp ground, leaving prints that seemed to vanish almost immediately. The air smelled of ozone, of rain before it falls, of something ancient and waiting. The barn doors stood open, though I hadn't touched them. Inside, the hum grew louder. It filled every corner, brushed my skin, made my breath tremble. Shadows bent along the walls, stretching in shapes that didn't belong, like the barn itself was breathing. The light revealed something vast, a shape too immense to belong to the earth. Yet it moved with a slow grace, its edges blending with the fog and the hum. I could not look away. I could not name it. Every sound outside the barn fell away. The wind held its breath. The fog froze. Even the rustling of a nearby corn seemed paused. It was only the glow, the hum, and the soft, unending pulse beneath my feet. I reached toward the light. My fingers brushed the warmth of it. Yet it did not burn. It thrummed against my skin, against my chest, like a living heartbeat, like the pulse of the entire field, like the whisper of everything that had ever waited here. The barn expanded in my vision, walls stretching, bending beyond reason. The soil beneath my feet throbbed in harmony with the hum. The light shifted, forming angles and curves, then dissolving into something vast, incomprehensible. I felt awe and fear coil in my stomach, then dissolve into silence. I wanted to speak. My throat closed. Only the hum remained. I inhaled slow, trembling, and felt the shape press against the edges of thought. So immense, so patient, so alive, that I realized there was nothing to do but witness. The glow softened. It pulsed once, twice. And then stillness. The barn, the field, the fog. They waited. Everything inside me stilled, as though the night itself held its breath. I stepped back, my boots sinking into the wet soil. The light lingered just beyond the threshold. Impossible to grasp, impossible to follow. It whispered to the edges of the fog, a promise or a memory, and then it faded completely, leaving only the hush of the field, the cold press of the night, and the echo of a hum inside my chest. I stood alone. The barn waited. The field waited. The sky held its pale light, quiet and endless, and I understood that nothing else would come. Only awe, only silence,